I'm Rachel Bennett, and this is a quick video. It's actually kind of a conglomerate of a bunch of random ideas that you might be able to implement using Microsoft PowerPoint. I just wanted to pull together some things that I use to show to people sort of how simple but how effective PowerPoint can be in demonstrating ideas to other people. Even a blank screen, such as the one you're looking at, which is actually just a gray slide, can be really, really powerful because it should completely divert the attention of people in the room away from the technology being used and towards the person who's speaking. So when you're using PowerPoint in a courtroom, it's really effective just to put a completely blank screen up there and give yourself the adequate attention of the room when it's not necessary for the people to be looking at something on the screen. I'm going to flip forward here to the next slide and show you just a really simple example of a piece of information that I've used in the past before in a mock trial situation, but nonetheless it was effective. And I walked a witness through his point of view at a basketball game. And so I said to this witness, where were you standing? And he said, over in the corner. And I said, does this circle represent where you were standing? And he said, yeah, that's where I was standing. And then proceeded to ask him, so where were these other two members standing? And he described those to me, and I was able to display those on the screen for the jurors to see. And I said, so what would you say your point of view was? And he described that to me. And then I pop up the next image, which shows his point of view was very unique. Most of the other witnesses were on the other side of the basketball court. And so this is really just a very simple sketch of a basketball court, a couple of shapes. You change the way they display and add some animations, and there you go. Ta-da, you have a really great illustration of someone's point of view in a particular situation. And this could be easily adaptable to, say, an intersection where an auto accident has happened or any other number of things. But it's a really easy skill to learn and something that you could use in a lot of different situations. The next video will demonstrate how to actually execute the things you're seeing in this PowerPoint. So we all know that it's important to lay out for the jury the elements of a cause of action so that they know exactly what to look for when they're lining up the evidence. And I know you know from listening to Dean Demers talk that color is really important. And so in this particular slide, all I did was list elements of a cause of action. That definitely appeals to type A people like me who want to see those check marks and be able to go through an inventory. Did they prove all of these different elements to me? And so all I did here was put the little white squares to indicate check boxes. And then as I walked through with the jury, the failure of the plaintiff to show these elements, I put the red X's up there. And you know, again, that importance of the color, the power of color. If you were to choose a color like green, that would be a positive color, which would add a positive connotation even though you're using an X. So you want to think about the combination of the symbol that you're using in addition to the color that you use, because it adds emphasis to what you're displaying to the jury. In this particular slide, we were illustrating that negligence consisted of 3 elements, and then gross negligence was just an additional element on top of traditional negligence. So we had the 3 elements show up first, and then this last element come up to be able to talk about what gross negligence means, and then of course adding the emphasis with the red X to show that the plaintiff did not meet their burden to prove gross negligence either. And again, these are super simple tools that you can use, but it really gives a visual to the jury to be able to see, you know, here I'm telling you are the 4 elements, and you're going to hear the judge say that in jury instructions, and you're going to be able to line up the evidence with those. It really gives you great talking points, but it also engages those visual people in the jury who want to see something and really get something out of seeing the words on the screen. This next slide is something that borders on almost ridiculous because it's so simple, but it works, and its effect is almost comical. So I don't know that I would legitimately take it into a courtroom, but you could take the idea and use it to create maybe better graphics. And so you could arguably say this is a table with 4 legs, right? The longer legs are in the front, longer legs are in the back, and you're looking at it completely at eye level, so the top of it is the flat part of the table. And so you say table has to have 4 legs in order to stand. And so if one of those legs were removed, what happens? Well, the whole table would fall down and fall apart, right? And so you can see here we were looking at the intentional tortive battery, which had 4 elements. And so as part of that description, when I used this graphic, I went through here the 4 elements, and so they didn't prove this one, and so their whole case just falls to pieces. There's so many zingers and puns you can add, but again, it's a good visual because you go from someone seeing, okay, I see a table with 4 legs. I understand the concept that if one of those legs is gone, it's going to lose stability. Oh, the whole thing falls apart. So very simple concept, but it works pretty effectively in terms of illustrating the necessity of proving all 4 legs or all 4 elements of a cause of action. Another thing that's really great to be able to do are create and use callouts, especially if you're talking about documents. Often people have a hard time seeing, or it's just hard to get the words big enough for people to be able to read them themselves. And if you're a visual person, you know that's frustrating. So to do a call out is very simple, but it's also very effective to help the viewer see the content in a better way and be able to really absorb what is on the screen. This is something that is crazy easy to do. It's something that really, again, is a fun place to play with color and shapes. If you have a jury verdict form and you're showing it to the jury and saying, you know, this is what you're going to take back into the deliberation room with you to make your decision, you can go through and say, you know, count 1, negligence. Here's why you need to find in favor of the defendant. Count 2, gross negligence. Here's why you need to find in favor of the defendant. Count 3, intentional tortive battery. Here's why you need to find in favor of the defendant. And while it sounds sometimes oversimplified, those green check marks have a very positive connotation. The color green is a positive, welcoming color, and so it's just little simple tiny things. You just take a screenshot of that jury verdict form and put those check marks in there, which are readily available to you in PowerPoint, and you have a really nice graphic to show to the jury of what you want them to do once they get into the deliberation room. This is kind of another one of those things that's just almost for fun, but could be used for really great purposes. So if you haven't caught on yet, the case we were talking about with several of these slides was related to a basketball game. And so this is sort of our zinger at the end. It was something along the lines of a toss and a miss. And so this is a motion path in PowerPoint. And so we said, you know, they may have tossed the basketball at this case, but they definitely missed the hoop and just bounced right out. So it's simple, again, but it kind of gives a powerful visual. You know, you aimed for the hoop, but you didn't make the mark. So this is a different presentation that I'm showing you here. This is actually a timeline, and it's the legislative history of the Federal Water Pollution Control Amendments of 1972. Timelines can be one of the most powerful and valuable tools to a litigator for a multitude of reasons. One, they're great prompts as you walk through what has happened in a case or in a particular scenario with listeners. And two, it appeals to those visual people who need to see it laid out and need to see how things fell into place. So it gives you the advantage of appealing to a multitude of learning types, and it also helps you along as you work through it. So this is simple. These are just shapes put in with animations that walk through a whole timeline of what happened in the development of this legislation. And so you could control the speed at which you move, you could control the speed at which you move through that and discuss those as extensively as you want. The one thing I will say about this slide is when you have it all up there, it tends to be a little busy. There are a lot of words going on the screen. So you want to be careful about how much content you put on a particular slide. But nonetheless, it gives you the ability to walk the listener through what you're talking about. This is one of the coolest things that PowerPoint does, I think, and that's allow you to put in animations and objects that really illustrate what's happening in a particular situation. And this is what people pay really big money to big companies for, when you can really kind of do a version that looks great and works well right by yourself in PowerPoint. And again, the second video will show you how to do this, but I want to show you what it looks like first. So this is a scenario where we were talking about the path that someone took to go from one place to another. So we say, okay, it's 7:30, our defendant is here. He says he starts at point A and he goes down Madison Street and then turns. And you can even add a car that tracks the line of the track here. Okay, he says it's 7:45 when he gets to point B. Then he says we go to point C. Car drives along. So that's between 8:30 and 9:30 that he arrives at point C. Then he says he goes back down from C to D and arrives at point D at, we don't know what time. He doesn't remember what time. And then he says he drives all the way up north to point E and arrives there at 10:15 or 10:30. And so this is simple, easy to do, but in an otherwise relatively confusing map allows you to let the viewer see the entire map and see where you're talking about and what's happening and where things are moving, without you, trying to use a laser pointer or trying to follow it with your finger or whatever else you might do. The other great thing about this is if you had a hardboard, an actual hardboard in front of you, and you wrote on it, you could potentially destroy that hardboard unless you had the plastic cover on it, which again, now we're talking about more money. The great thing about this is it's electronic, which means it's completely subject to manipulation, and you can make it do what you want it to do. The other great thing about this is that you could demonstrate that there are differences in or different paths that someone could have taken. And so that's what I did with the second part of the slide, is say, okay, so the defendant says he went this way, but it's also possible that he went back up 2 blocks and went down the street where the murder occurred. So easy enough to show off 2 different paths and how they might intersect and lead a person to the same place. So really, what you can do with PowerPoint is pretty amazing in terms of what we've all seen and know about PowerPoint. I think most of us just think about PowerPoint as being, words on a slide and somebody's just reading off the words on a slide, but it really has a ton of powerful tools associated with it and a lot of ways to use those tools to create images that are valuable in describing particular situations. So the next video, I'm actually going to switch out of presentation mode and show you how to execute some of these different techniques that I've shown you in this particular video.